This is Novichok, the deadliest chemical weapon ever created by humanity. Just coming into contact with even a tiny amount, whether liquid, gas, or powder, is enough to instantly shut down a person's nervous system. But the lethality of this Nov agent isn't just about its toxicity, it can actually completely evade detection systems. You might be wondering, why would anyone develop such a terrifying weapon? Just how deadly is it, really? In fact, it was born during the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union, when the two superpowers competed in every field at all costs to outdo each other. This included national defense, space, nuclear weapons, and chemical warfare. At that time, many powerful chemical weapons had already been developed, such as the notorious sarin gas used in the 1995 Tokyo subway attack, and the VX nerve agent used to assassinate Kim Jong-nam. However, these deadly weapons were not perfect, their use was not safe enough, and they were also easily detected by detection devices. Therefore, in the 1970s, Soviet scientists launched a program aimed at developing a new generation of chemical weapons, ones that would be even more deadly and much harder to detect. In 1973, they successfully synthesized the first version of what would later be known as Novichok, with two early variants, A230 and A232. The creation of these compounds marked the renaming of the world's most advanced nerve agents, and, moreover, they could not be detected by machines. What's even more terrifying is that it could resist standard protective equipment and remain stable in forms such as liquid, gas, or powder. Novichok could also be used in countless ways in large-scale warfare, and you might not imagine that the dose required to eliminate a target is actually minuscule. By the late 1980s, animal experiments had already proven Novichok's devastating effects, and scientists at the time were still developing even more advanced versions of Novichok for warfare. However, no other country knew about this substance until the collapse of the Soviet Union. In 1992, Russia was about to join the Chemical Weapons Convention, a treaty that bans chemical weapons. But just before signing the treaty, two Russian scientists publicly exposed the Novichok program. The timing of their revelation was extremely critical, but no one would admit to it, and the whole world chose to believe what Russia said. A few months later, Russia successfully joined the Chemical Weapons Convention. But in the mid-1990s, the German intelligence agency managed to obtain Novichok from Russia, and Swedish tests also confirmed its authenticity. However, nothing happened for many years. According to the scientists who exposed Novichok, the weapon was developed for war at the time, but it was never actually used. In 2015, a Bulgarian arms dealer, his son, and a colleague all fell seriously ill. Doctors believed their illness was caused by pesticides, but surveillance evidence showed that Russian agents were present at the scene. Years later, it was confirmed that they had been poisoned by Novichok. Fortunately, all three survived. In 2018, a series of photos were taken in Salisbury, UK, showing a former Russian spy and his daughter found unconscious on a park bench, both foaming at the mouth. However, neither of them died, but investigators discovered that agents had sprayed Novichok on the front door handle of their home. A few months later, a local man found a used perfume bottle and gave it to his wife. Neither of them knew that the bottle had contained a deadly toxin. After she used the perfume bottle, she died a few days later, and her husband was also seriously affected. In 2020, Russia's opposition leader Alexei Navalny suddenly fell seriously ill during a flight. He made an emergency landing in Germany for treatment, and doctors believed he had been poisoned with Novichok. However, he survived. In all of these cases, the way they were poisoned was truly terrifying. The victims came into contact with Novichok in the most ordinary settings. Just a tiny amount of Novichok is enough to cause harm, and by the time it's discovered, it's already too late. However, these incidents are only the cases we know about, because they involve survivors who lived to tell the tale. For those victims who died, no one would even think to test for it. That's why Novichok is considered the perfect poison. You might think that such a deadly poison would be easy to detect, but Novichok was designed with this in mind from the very beginning. It's undetectable, untraceable, and extremely precise. So how can something so toxic remain invisible? Novichok belongs to a class of chemicals called organophosphates, compounds that can disrupt the body's most vital functions. When the nervous system is functioning normally, the brain uses a chemical messenger called acetylcholine to transmit electrical signals. Acetylcholine sends signals to muscles or organs, causing them to contract, and then an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase immediately resets the system to prepare for the next signal. But Novichok destroys that reset switch by binding to the enzyme and permanently disabling it. With nothing left to break down the chemical signals, acetylcholine floods the nervous system, triggering an uncontrollable storm. The body's muscles start to twitch uncontrollably, and the victim begins to drool, vomit, and lose control over their body. If the victim doesn't receive specialized medical help immediately, the body will fall into a coma, the muscles needed for breathing will stop responding, and the heart will stop beating as well. And the amount of Novichok needed to cause all this is so tiny, it's almost negligible. To understand this toxin, scientists use a measurement called LD50, which refers to the dose required to kill half of those exposed. For Novichok variants like A234, this number is about 0.2 milligrams, hundreds of times smaller than the lethal dose of VX. This means that just a single drop, a spray, or even a trace amount of Novichok is enough to kill dozens of people. Even if someone survives, the pain will haunt them for life. In 1987, a Soviet chemist accidentally inhaled a small amount of Novichok during an experiment. Although he survived, he suffered for years afterward from chronic nerve damage, breathing difficulties, cognitive and sensory problems, and unbearable pain. In the end, he died from the long-term torment. But what truly makes Novichok deadly isn't just its toxicity, it's the way it kills silently, without leaving any trace. Because the lethal dose is so tiny, even modern forensic experts may not be able to detect it after it's been used. In fact, the first version of Novichok was what's called a single agent, meaning the fully formed compound was always in an active state and ready for immediate use. This made Novichok not only deadly, but also extremely unstable. So during the Cold War, Soviet scientists developed a binary version of Novichok. Now, instead of being a single active compound, it was made from two relatively harmless chemicals, which could even pass through border checks separately without being detected. Only when they were mixed together, right at the moment of use, would they become the deadly Novichok. This binary design made Novichok much easier to smuggle, safer to handle, and much harder to trace, which is why it became the most advanced chemical weapon ever created. Of course, no country would ever admit to possessing Novichok, and the scientists who revealed the truth were arrested for leaking state secrets. Of course, some people believe that this substance was simply made up. After all, how could someone be poisoned and then rescued? However, after Alexei Navalny was attacked in 2020, laboratories in several European countries confirmed that the substance used in the assassination attempt was the latest variant of Novichok. So, many people suspect that there are still individuals developing, improving, and using Novichok. If it is still being developed today, that means the world's hardest to detect and most deadly poison, Novichok, is no longer just a rumor, it could become the most terrifying chemical weapon in human warfare.